In section 14-2, we are actually determining an account, so a company that is not going to pay us back, and we need to do what's called write off their account. And then also the scenario where, okay, we wrote off a company's account. We said we no longer were going to even try and collect that money anymore, but then they pay us. So then we need to reopen that account and do another journal entry. So writing off an account, that is when you cancel the balance of the customer account because you are no longer going to be able to get that money. So there could be a lot of reasons for this. Maybe that company filed for bankruptcy. Maybe that company just isn't able to pay any of their balances with any of the companies that they owe money to for whatever reason. But we are done trying to get that money from them, and we are just going to write off their account and move on. So we are writing off Edmonds Hospital past due account as uncollectible. We're saying we're not going to get this $639.88. So what we need to do is we need to decrease the allowance for uncollectible accounts with a debit, and also decrease accounts receivable because we are eliminating that account entirely. We would much prefer that instead of allowance for uncollectible accounts, we were just debiting cash and crediting accounts receivable. That'd be best case scenario. They paid us like they said they would. Well, instead, we have to use that allowance for uncollectible accounts because we are not going to get that money. So this is what the transaction looks like. Allowance for uncollectible accounts will be debited. And then we're going to decrease accounts receivable with a credit. So when we go to post this, so we'll post like we always have. We will take the date. We will actually write written off in Edmonds Hospital's account to show that you'll see that we have a zero balance when we credit that account. We now have a zero balance. Well, that's not because they paid and they no longer owe us money. We wrote it off saying we are not going to get this money. That's an expense for our company. So we want to make that really clear on their account so it doesn't appear as though they paid us. So we write written off and then credit their account, and we're left with a zero balance. This is a situation where we just said we aren't going to accept, or we're not going to ever get any money for Edmonds Hospital. We'll write off their account. Well, then on March 9th, we randomly get a payment from Edmonds Hospital. So what we need to do is the opposite of the transaction that we just did. So we're going to debit accounts receivable and credit allowance for uncollectible accounts, the opposite of the transaction that we just did. So debiting accounts receivable puts a balance back in that account that we had previously zeroed out. And then we are going to credit allowance for uncollectible accounts to take it out of the expense. So this is just the exact opposite of the transaction that we just did. It is flipped. We have to undo what we just did. So flip them, accounts receivable debit, allowance for uncollectible accounts, credit. When we're posting, now when we post that debit, it puts a balance back into Edmonds Hospital account, and we write reopen account. So it shows, okay, yes, they do have a balance again, and we're reopening it. Then when we go to post the cash receipts, which is the next journal entry we're going to do, because we received cash, we'll go into the cash receipts journal. We will debit cash, and that will decrease their account. So here is the last part of it. We need to debit cash, credit accounts receivable in our cash receipts journal. Credit the accounts receivable account, that will zero out their balance, and debit cash. This is what we would have preferred to done just straight from the beginning, but we didn't think that we were going to receive money from Edmonds Hospital at all. So we had to do a whole allowance for uncollectible accounts transaction. Well, then when they paid us, we had to flip and undo that allowance for uncollectible accounts transaction and then post into our cash receipts journal for the cash that we received.